go to the other one because the other one's more temperamental. I love four go-arounds, so I'm really excited.
This makes more sense than last time we did this.
I know. I'm not enjoying.
Last time I judged in this room, the judges for some reason sat there and the debater sat there, which I thought was an interesting choice.
I quit at trying to figure out how this works. The debater is not going to here.
What?
The debater is not up here.
That's why I was so confused, because they're like three different sections.
That's
not
weird. Preaching down.
And here's this where they already copied it, so.
What else did you
After. Right. Yes, finish this.
Do we have all the judges? Yes, we're at.
I still need to get my figure set up.
Okay, we do have all. Should I close the door?
Yeah.
Are you one of the judges?
I am. Okay, sorry. I just want to say. My name is Kennedy. Nice to meet you. You don't know me very much, so. Do you have any questions or getting the last pieces together? I have one question. Could we enact all of our pronouns so we refer to each other? Start from left to right? She is fine.
Yeah, she's fine.
She is fine.
Okay, go with it.
All right. Congratulations, everyone. Before we start, maybe we'll start with NPTE. Does somebody want to read adjourn?
I'm ready.
All right. First is the framework required to evaluating the theoretic consequences of policy. We need to first answer the question of how political bodies should orient themselves towards the value of water. This ideological commitment constrains how we evaluate the impacts on humans and animals. The second framework point is that intelligibility of water is socialized as
Intelligibility of impact.
intelligibility is socialized. For example, like your grandma would really understand if you told her why you need to get off the rock. Thus, we must interrogate the reasons, the ways that we've been socialized before we can look at these impacts. The A point is that this is a prior question to ethical engagement. The B point is that we need to take right actions for the right reasons. For example, you should not kill someone because you respect their dignity, not just because you see them as untouchable. Then the C point is that ideology leads to most proximal and probable impacts in every instance. The third framework point is that the impact of discrete policies are swamped by the evaluation of ideological value because A, the downsides of policies can always be independently rectified if our value system is correct, and B, ideologies frame which policies we even bring up. What we see is important. This comes before whether or not we say policies are good or bad. The C point is that these ideological effects of how we implement policies are bad for doing the bad thing for the right reasons is bad. The fourth point is that violation of justice for net benefits creates this permanent state of exception. The fifth point is that this discussion of ideological value is key to giving debate power to our own orientation towards the world. That this determines what our ideological commitments should be as we approach the world, and this is key because this is the most proximal impact. The way that we ethically orient ourselves towards the world is the only thing that we really are going to be able to walk out of this room having changed. The next point is water is life. This has its own page. Water is life, and this is a prior to evaluating the other.
We already did that.
Water is life. This is the ideological
commitment of our policy action.
Okay, this is the ideological commitment of our policy actions. First is that the ideology The ideology by which water is life is key to interrogating social and nature. The social and nature.
Society and nature.
Society and nature. This is the most fundamental need, which is dependent on nature and the world. Second one is that we have a long history and effective environmental environmental policy by governments, which means that
government policy is long-shaped water policy.
Okay.
That means that
government policy is long-shaped water policy, which means that government is key.
Interrogating this is key.
Interrogating this is key. The third point is that we should defer to it to advocate by systemic.
We should defer to things that have been advocated by systemically marginalized individuals.
Okay, we should defer to things that have been advocated by systemically marginalized individuals. For example, we should default to people who protested at Standing Rock or for Flint, Michigan for clean water, and for clean water and for clean water in the global south. And we should always be advocating for things that the most marginalized have advocated for. The fourth point is that this is the key ideological commitment, which is a symbol of equality, which cannot be isolated. The fifth point is that the water and
water
life,
is a symbol of equality.
Water is a symbol of equality, which we must isolate. The water and life UN action is key because the UNDHR leads to the cascading impacts. That if we fund the UNDHR, that this is going to lead to other impacts.
The UN has already declared things about water, so implementing these kinds of policies has cascading impacts.
Yeah, the UN has already. Yeah, that's what I was saying. The UN has already made policies about water, which is why we need these cascading impacts. And the sixth point is that the use of water as a life ideology is a prerequisite to political advocacy. Because we need to change the discourse because of the way it relates to religion, like things like baptism and hand washing, and also Western metaphysical understandings of water as being important to everything. And that this connects people, and that we need to use this political discourse to form a coalition to gather as many people as possible, and to be able to use political discourse to put intrinsic value on water. Therefore, thus the advocacy. The UN will treat objectives of the WASH program, implementing water, sanitation, and hygiene, as a matter of peacekeeping rather than UNICEF aid, and will double its funding via the peacekeeping fund. Again, the UN will treat objectives of the WASH program, implementing water, sanitation, and hygiene, as a matter of peacekeeping rather than UNICEF aid, and will double its funding via the peacekeeping fund. The advantage. Or politics of water. The uniqueness. One, water as a hierarchy discourse is a system of water which water is distinctly reifies current problematic hierarchies. The 8th point is that climate change has significantly exacerbated social needs for water. For example, in the greater Fertile Crescent region, mostly in Syria and Iraq, we experienced worst drought in history, which is by the instrumental records between 2007 and 2010, which attributed to climate change. The 3rd point is that this in turn leads to secondary and tertiary effects of ecology and human systems, i.e. food insecurity, forced migration, serial policy failure, etc. The sequence of trajectory as it stands normalizes such occurrences. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change estimates that the climate change is likely to put an increased pressure on the water resources in Mediterranean and Northern African regions over the next decade, notably increasing droughts. The D point is that control over waterways is becoming increasingly important for sustainable jobs and economic development. The 2016 UN World Water Development Report found that 3 out of 4 jobs worldwide are water dependent. In fact, water shortages limit economic growth. The second uniqueness point is that water as a weapon. Current international communities allow water to become a weapon because of geopolitical interactions. The 8th point is that many historical examples of water as a weapon, even without scarcity. The 1 point on the little one under the Kingdom of Mesopotamia, where King Elim used irrigation techniques to cut off water to nearby regions 4,500 years ago. The next example is the Dutch opened dikes to stop advancing French troops in the Third Franco-Dutch War. The third example is the U.S. strategic strategy involved bombing dams during the Korean conflicts to eliminate resources of the Korean people. The 4th point is that Saddam Hussein used water as a strategic weapon against the Shia population by diverting water from marshes between the Tigris and Euphrates, driving hundreds of thousands of people from homes, and exacting environmental disasters of epic proportions. The B point is that water for strategic weaponization. The first point under this is that Daesh diverted the Tigris River to flood the province of Iraq, which was 781 acres of agricultural land and homes and 2 meters of water, and cut off drinking water for 10 days to other provinces in the regions at a different time. The second point is that hydroterrorism targets strategic water resources to create fear and uncertainty in populations about whether or not water will be available, using it to biopolitically control people and make them live in fear, and it's just securitizing obsessions. Then the C point is that the weaponization of water is at an all-time high, and the Syria example is the example of this. The D point is that even when it's not used as a weapon, discourse has been weaponized, and water access discourse as a strategic military, not an environmental. For example, weaponizing water data has happened when we have things like water intelligence. The links First, the AFSHA's control of water to developing nations, which is key to being able to control. The control gives the relation between water and life, and a return control over life is localized bodies and community. The second is that water filtration it has importance and ideological importance in recognizing the need to purify after Western pollution, and thus the activity. The third point is that the AF shifts to qualitative over quantitative view of water with a developmental focus. The fourth is that the UN is key to recognizing the internal importance of water to everyone. The fifth point is that this saves huge numbers of lives and recognizes water as important, and peacekeeping is key. Then the impacts, this ends the command of water. This also increases the social empathy, the systemic violence and dignity over own life. This also fights water-related death like typhoid and diarrhea, which is the worst form of institutional violence. And quality over quantity understands water as socially important.
Ready for thoughts?
Yeah, we start.
Do you endorse the theodic implications of your advocacy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Alright. Are we ready? Alright. Alright, so, one off the case. Yeah, cool. Everybody ready? Alright. I'm sorry. For roll call times currently. Alright. And everyone is ready, okay. Remember, the interpretation into the role of balance vote with you with the best discursive method to result in real world violence. The viewpoint here is standard, the viewpoint here is key to real world education, the endpoint here is that policy will be real. Actually, you know, I want to read the policy stuff. The one point here is that moral is it's possible to direct moral or reprehensible arguments in this world because, yeah, I'll get that. That's actually around me. We can make moral or reprehensible arguments in a world where we don't address the discursive methods. The B point here is the policy making purpose of man. The A point here, the I point here is the policy making mechanisms of power. The B point here, the little light point here is that we need to shift the epistemological location of the colonized body and construct the location of the PMC because it has a holistic understanding of violence. The C point here is that we have to evaluate post-colonial impacts first. They understand the systems of power that produce our knowledge of conflict, violence, and internal policy. Therefore, they require question. The I point here is the ideology of colonialism. It catalyzes the colonized bodies wanting to control, else the savage makes the world destruction. This framing not only makes the this not only dooms the colonized domination and authorization, but further is the state's monopolization of colonial lands and colonial laws. But this is the current theory of international relations. International relations relies on a hierarchical binary wherein developing nations are forced to the periphery by the cosmopolitan West. The West lives by representative colonized bodies, helpless savage, that needs to be civilized. This consists of endless sexual project where the West utilizes its economic, social, military, and political power to incentivize separation of nations to follow the path determined for them by the West. These choices are made without genuine interest genuine intent to end those in the river, but rather the best interests of the West in mind. The link point one here is, the first link here is their use of peacekeeping. The actual history of peacekeepers, the use of UN peacekeeping is UN peacekeepers sexually assaulting women in developing nations, particularly indigenous women, which they see it, which peacekeepers see it like probably means using the UN for peacekeeping is probably pretty colonial. The ASAP leaders is that these peacekeepers don't even make conflicts short. They can make them longer, probably indicating that the actual use of the UN as a peacekeeping agency is just terminally doomed to failure.
Additionally, they justify the peacekeepers and particularly their funding.
They justify peacekeeping and particularly their funding probably very bad given the colonial history of this part of the UN. The 2 point years UN water assistance is to any group is a guide for colonialism and imperialism. The ASAP point here is the UN is a guide for determining which international actors are considered rational and which are considered irrational. For example, the ways in which the United States helps outlines the colonial construct of rationality. For example, when the UN increases water aid to Haiti during the earthquake, the aid came with 20,000 troops occupying Haiti. The visa pointed to means humanitarian aid is used as the catalyst for increased occupation by the West. Occupation in the form of the troops, as well as epistemic occupation. And the 3 point here is the UN water aid operates through a framework of international law. The ASAP point here is an international law in that it has specific guidelines for what it means to be a state and how actors are supposed to act. The UN specifies that only states that accept international laws can get water aid in the first place. That's why the UN refuses water aid to Palestine, even though their access to water is almost limited. The visa point here is that under the colonial framework, this means 2 things. Either nations are forced to concede international law and get punished by colonial economic policies, or they reject international law framing and get excluded from international considerations and get treated like Palestine, giving them giving pretext for occupation, desolation, and isolation. The 4th link here is they seek to entrench nations in the. I don't really read that. Never mind. On the impacts. The first impact is this Turns case. The ASAP point here is this forces the creation of arbitrary divisions in the periphery that the West uses to play groups against each other, creating systemic violence. See Angola, Afghanistan, Syria, Mali, and Algeria. This creates civil war conditions that last 7 times longer than normal war, leads to exponentially larger amounts of death. The visa point establishes a static framing this established static framing establishes a cap on the peripheral quality of life, spending them on the fringes and allowing them literally just being deemed as expendable. Otherization is the biggest impact of this route. It's systemic and repeatable. Additionally, otherization is the internal link to all forms of violence. Those people become disposable. Then anything can be justified against. The 2 point here is epidemic eradication. The 8 point here is that a master narrative is preferred by colonial powers creating an identity absent subjectivity. This leads to epistemological eradication for epistemologies that can counter colonial master narrative. The 8 point here is creates a self-fulfilling prophecy in which nations, which the heads of states and militaries always systemically act to save and discipline the savage, which ironically is it is the violence that creates the conception of the savage in the first place. The 3rd impact here is ecology. The ASAP here is that colonialism controls whether countries have the possibility to become affluent. The visa point here is that, for instance, Haiti was forced to use overtilling. The C point here is that overtilling will always lead to biodiversity collapse, because when you overtill soil, it dries out. Okay, cool. All is to vote negative and reject the coloniality of the PNC and endorse ethics of liberation in international relations. Vote negative to reject the coloniality of the PNC and endorse an ethic of liberation in international relations. The solve point 1 here is the ethic. What? We'll give you a text during the cross-text. The solve point 1 here is the ethics of liberation, solve plus point of implementation. The ASAP is to transform structures and institutions, activities, and the legitimate oppression. The B point is double translation means that the negotiate perspectives and the alternative epistemologies are seen as equally valid. This means indigenous intellectuals aren't seen as objects of study, but rather as groups that can think for themselves. The point here is the alternative leads to institutional and real-life long-term consultancy for further action. The ASAP point here is rejection is key, allows space for ideas the counter-colonial narrative. The 3rd point here is the B point. The B point here is that the status quo doesn't allow the alt. We've got all institutional members. We've got the institutional members. The 3rd point is to solve the after. The 8 point here is that ethics of liberation solved. Now we view all actors other than including non-state actors become able to help in Haiti without water or any nation. Sorry. The B point here is the doctors that borders aren't excluded. Doctors that borders are excluded from the B point here is the resolve. There's something to cross that out. The B point here is the C point here is allowing for new epistemologies, leads for new ways of solving, which are impossible in the status quo. The E point here is that we solve for the root cause which stops this from happening in the future or worsening means the long-term better solvency, the mandate fix the act. 4 point here is that alternative organizations can be seen as more legit, like an organization called Water is Life, which has an appropriate, which is a global scope, and Water.org, which is an NGO and global scope. On the solvency point, we say that this will empirically fail. Peacekeepers brought cholera to Haiti, and they are in fact the root cause of the reason why there's cholera in Haiti, plus circumvented safety procedures and increased contamination. Probably indicates the act has no possibility to solve, given the act they choose is just terrible at this job. On the app, we say that ideology is not the ideology alone is not I guess we're kind of an ideological challenge. Okay. We said that non-production of coloniality is a prior question to ideology, because otherwise we can create ideologies that fundamentally produce colonialist ethics. Probably indicates this is probably we have the root cause here. Additionally, we say that yeah. Alright, on to the water stuff. We are the internal link being able to solve probably indicates also that they have no potential for solving probably indicates that we should always prefer our understanding of the world. Additionally, we're going to say that on the alt page, on the solvency page, we say that the peacekeepers are bad. What else?
I look at the links page, specifically they say that peacekeeping is key.
They said peacekeeping is key, but they don't have any warrants. This probably indicates there's no potential to solve. Additionally, we say that they said the UN is key. This is probably not true either, given the UN's colonial act probably indicates the UN is only able to make water situations worse.
Look at the way like 500 viral nations have.
Look at the way. Yeah, look at the way like U.S. has a veto on the Security Council.
5
colonial nations have a Security Council because.
Sorry, Flex.
I agree with you, but
Can you explain how you solved the app?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Which
it's going to be
way?
solvency. It's going to be solvency point one, the alternative, specifically and because the ethic of liberation solves because the way that we view all actors is legitimate. First of all, we're going to
So can you explain the Doctors Without Borders claim, like?
yeah, so that's also talked about in point four, the alternative organizations are something more legitimate and they're going to fill in the gap with you.
Okay, gotcha.
Additionally,
Awesome, thanks.
ethic of liberation, when we view people, all people as deserving of water,
Yeah.
inherently doing that, that's going to resolve back.
Okay. And then, outside of the fact that we defend using the UN, can you explain a link?
Yeah, specifically you talk about peacekeepers and you like advocate using the peacekeeping budget and
Yeah, but that's tied to the UN, so like
Okay, so like
outside.
aside from your action, you don't link. Because if you don't do anything, you wouldn't link. That's true.
like that's a very important part of what you advocate.
Right, but like, is, okay, cool.
And the way that you use international legalistic frameworks.
Which is fine.
Like most of it is tied to the UN, yes.
Great, thanks. What's the role of the ballot again?
Oh, did we get the text to you? Oh,
But whoever has the best discursive methodology to resolving real world violence.
And what's discursive?
Discursive is based upon our institutions.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks.
Can you do the text?
No, it's fine.
Okay, you're okay, cool. You don't need the text, that's fine.
I'm good.
You need a text to the alt.
Yes, I got it.
Oh, you gave a text. Oh, you gave a text to the alt. Okay, I thought you did a text to the alt.
Okay. So there's going to be an overview on top. It's going to be rather lengthy, so you can do as you would like, but potentially an extra page. I'll be cross-applying it to like different parts of the K. Then I'm going to make some extensions out of the affirmative, but I will start on the framework debate, so you can put the framework for both of us there, as well as the water is life page, then the affirmative in original PNC order, the rest of it. And then it's going to be the K in the order of alternative links and impacts. Should I repeat that?
Yeah, there's close where you are because we're all going on the
Yeah, for sure. Pretty good. Water is life is is the question through which you should be evaluating every impact in this round. The first argument is that all impacts need to be framed through reorientation towards water. They do not interrogate this or have a reorientation towards water. At best, they just say that everyone has a right to water, which is just an extension out of the affirmative. No independent reason to vote for them. The second argument is that this affects our impact levels. The little and of this is that this orientation towards water reframes how we understand and prioritize water. It's not just about the net benefits of a plan or the net benefit or what is the root cause, which I'll get to later, but instead it's about how the app allows the correct reorientation towards water. Secondly, little b is that this constrains what counts as a meaningful link. Links that merely isolate foreseen consequences or just say like you use the UN and that's bad without interrogating the ways in which we have expectations of the UN being bad or the ways in which we have expectations of the impacts being materialized. Of those consequences are always going to be constrained by a prior question of the ways in which we create those sorts of ideological commitments in the first place. We have to understand where our ideological commitments come from and what makes sense to us, whether or not, like obviously the affirmative is not the normal type of thing that gets read in debate, but we are predisposed not to think that those normal things are, those non-normal things are good things, and so we have to interrogate that and therefore have to have an orientation towards what in order to resolve this. Next point on the overview is that ideological impacts always outweigh because they flood future policy making. This is not just about this one policy. It's not just about using the UN in this instance, but it is about how we as individuals or how the UN or any actor orients themselves towards water. All of your links are to the UN and the status quo. They are not to the links to the UN that has an orientation towards water being something that is a fundamental right that everyone has that they deserve. This means that it is not really a question about whether or not the US should do this, even though you do defend that this is a good action. It is rather a question of the ideological commitments. We believe that the UN should hold the demands that we make on the state in order to do that. This means that that all of their impacts are contingent on the status quo, but we are not contingent on the status quo, so you should prefer our impacts. The last point. The last point is that it doesn't matter how good the alternative is, or how good the option of the alternative is. But we do not train how to explain the good impacts of the alternative to in ways that we can explain to other people. The 2016 election is empirical evidence. This I tried to explain to my parents tons and tons of times why not to vote for Trump, but they would not listen to me. It is therefore not just a question of what is a good thing, but why we do that thing in order to evaluate the sorts of impacts. Cool. Go to the framework debate. Okay. The first thing that I want you to extend is that ideology is always a prior question. You can extend this out of the overview or out of the PMC. That ideology always influences why we do things. This means that this is always going to be a prior question. You said that we have to resolve real world violence. We have to actually interrogate what allows us to consider certain things as violence or not. We consider even within a liberal debate community, we interrogate certain kinds of violence and ignore other kinds of violence. There's lots of things that I can't talk about in the debate space because they're not considered to be valid forms of oppression or considered within identity or considered to they just aren't considered to be valid. Means that we have to look at our orientations first. That's always going to be a prior question. This means that we are always able to resolve real world violence. It's also the most proximal impact because resolving real world violence is always a question of orientation. It's a question of whether or not I understand somebody as other or not, because that is the question by which I actually interrogate interactions with people in this room and when I walk outside of this room. Okay, let's see. You're okay on their root cause claims. Post-colonialism is the root cause of some things, but not the root cause of all violence. Maybe root cause things that is always one that always isolates other types of claims that, or violence that is not caused by these sorts of things. You cannot account for every kind of violence in the entire world of these sorts of systems. Additionally, but even if you could account for this, it's always going to include other mechanisms. It's not just this. It's not just at the root. It's also what has exacerbated it through the various systems of intersectionality of violence. And post-colonialism impacts things like racism and sexism, but those things also came beforehand and also influence ways when we interact with those things. Therefore, isolating one root cause can never actually allow us to interrogate the multiplicity of violence. We should therefore interrogate the question of the resolution, which is a question of water, as being a prior question. But maybe framework. But cool. Anything else on framework? No. Cool. The affirmative. All right. Their only offense is that we're going to fail because we use peacekeepers. I have one major response to this. You can extend the second uniqueness point out of the advantage, which says that water is used as a weapon currently. This means that it is not a question of using peacekeepers, but rather that we should stop treating water as if this was like a secondary thing, and as instead being threats to water as being a threat to life itself. We have to understand that water is life. This is a matter of life and death. This is not some auxiliary concern as though this was less important than the other things that the UN usually prioritizes. That is our choice to use peacemakers. All of their links are to peacekeepers in the status quo, not to the fact that we do this. Additionally, the fact that we are taking this money out, initially we are putting any peacekeepers down there. We're just like putting money into, I think it's implementation, water sanitation, and hygiene. There is no peacekeepers that are going to be on the ground because you have no impact. This at the very fact we turn this because we're taking money away from the peacekeeper fund, which means that we're taking funding away from the people who've done these bad things and saying you need to stop doing those bad things and instead understand water is life. anything else on that. You can extend, they make a link because
It's also key because of orientation. We're saying that this is a peacekeeping issue, not like a humanitarian issue.
Right. It's also key because of orientation. We're saying this is a peacekeeping issue and not a question of humanitarianism. Their only other arguments is that we have no warrant for using peacekeepers, but I just explained that, and then they said that the UN makes things worse because it has colonial powers on the Security Council. Our analysis that all is again, this is all predicated on the status quo, not on these things. Additionally, the fact that there's going to be we are doubling the funding for this initiative and we are reorienting the UN means that we are able to resolve it. And additionally, because yes, these countries are on the Security Council, but they're also the major funders of these things, means they're going to be pouring a lot of money into funding things in developing nations. You don't give any analysis about why just money itself for things that scientists have said are good things is going to be bad. You just have generic analysis about the UN and not about the specific things we are doing, which means you don't interact with it. This means we're actually going to hurt the UN, or hurt US credibility, because we're saying, no, you need to be held accountable for the fact that you've ignored developing nations. That's a large part of our affirmative means we're actually going to be questioning these powers. We are making demands on the oppressor, not saying the oppressor is this great thing. Those are distinct claims. Don't let them put us into a box.
We're saying prioritize justice over charity, which is how you deconstruct.
We prioritize justice over charity, which is how we deconstruct neocolonialism, which is how we deconstruct colonialism. It is a question of justice. It is not the UN coming in and being a savior. It is the UN saying, I done messed this up, so I'm going to go and give you something that you deserve intrinsically, not a gift to you. All your links are links to gifts. Extend the impacts about how this commodifies individuals and about how this is key to quality of life, means that understanding water is of key social importance, means that we are always a prior question on the alternative. Okay, the first argument is PERM rejects coloniality and endorse the ethic of liberation in international relations. PERM rejects coloniality and endorse an ethic of liberation in international relations. It's just all the non-competitive parts of the alt. This is the ethic of the app. The alt is just an instantiation of the app without having the impacts of the ideological claims that we have told you are always a prior question. What? It's just Plan Plus. This means that, but it's just Plan Plus, except that it is not, okay. We are able to do this because we are already resolving this question. We have already done this thing, which means that the alternative is simply not competitive. They say classify all of my overview analysis to reasons why they cannot solve. It is impossible for them to solve their ethics of liberation. Don't answer this at the point at which they do not interact with the fact they say everyone has a right to water, but they don't interact with the fact that water is life. They don't even touch on that thing as an indication as to why they are not able to resolve the affirmative. Means that, and classify my root cause bad claims on the links. They classify all of my analysis here. They do not have one specific link to our reorientation of the UN. Additionally, we are making claims, we are making demands on the UN, not saying we think the UN is a good thing. We can make demands on our oppressors without endorsing our oppressors. In fact,
away from peacekeepers.
Also classify taking money away from peacekeepers means we are able to resolve this question. This means that they did not turn case. We are the only one who's able to solve.
So are you getting this reorientation?
No, I asked that already. I have one quick question.
Okay.
Why did you decide to make it funded via the peacekeeping fund?
Why did we decide to do that? Yeah, because it's a question of life and death.
I mean, why does that resolve the question of life and death, besides just doubling the funding?
Oh, no, our analysis is that it should come out of the peacekeeping fund because that is intended to keep peace. That is intended to deal with war things, and water is being used as a weapon.
Okay.
I mean, do you want to go for the
They said yes, they defended the audit implications.
You know, I'm asking if fiating the reorientation of the UN. Are you fiating the reorientation of the UN, or is that just an implication of your plan?
I mean, we say that the act is a reorientation implicitly. That by
Yes, but are you fiating that, or are you just...
I'm trying to find the plain text. Hold on.
no.
Okay, cool.
But it necessitates it.
Okay.
So the order is going to be criticism, and the order of framework and its impacts all. And then the app and the order I have it floated more or less, which is basically straight down. I'll be talking about some of the app framework on the K framework, so.
Do you have the overview on its own page?
Yeah.
Just signpost when you get to.
Yeah. I'll address all of it when the arguments on kind of their respective pages.
Okay.
Everyone ready? First off, they say that we are not the root cause of all violence. However, we are going to argue that we are the root cause of water insecurity, specifically developing nations, because of the way that resource securitization is the founding linchpin of colonialism. Colonialism is the reason why there is resource securitization over water in colonized countries. They are simply dropping our historical analysis of the way that developed countries use resource securitization in these particular countries in order to get rid of their control and their manipulation of these other countries using the international system. This is all of the pieces of the point where they're dropping all of this, they're dropping all of the relevant root causes, and just because we're not the root cause to literally every single type of violence, doesn't mean we're not the root cause to their water is life claims. Probably means we are ahead of this question. Additionally, the point where they use a indigenous term, an indigenous phrase for fights against colonialism, the way that the U.S. is currently colonizing resources and standing wrong right now probably means without actually acknowledging the way that indigenous people have been doing the work for this, and when they're taking indigenous ideas and they're giving them credit, probably means that they buy into this criticism. Additionally, we're going to argue that, I think that's all I'm doing right now. Cool, on to the links. They say this on weapons and peacekeepers. We say that they use peacekeepers as methods of prioritizing this. They view peacekeeping as an important thing, and they view specifically the peacekeeping mission by the UN as an important goal towards keeping peace. Because they view it in this particular way, their ontology is bad. You're going to be voting for the team with the best discursive method to resolve real-world violence. The links are indications of why the discursive method is bad. Even if you wanted to go more broadly, you could say this is the reason why their entire method is bad and is doomed to fail over and over again, as these methods have failed in the past when they're not inclusive of our analysis of the colonized body. Go on to the thesis arguments about how colonialism creates knowledge reduction and status quo. Cool, I'm going to be like cross-applying that to their framework when I get to it. We say they treat peacekeeping as legitimate and something to be prioritized. Additionally, they make peacekeeping look good, which masks all the harms that they've done in the past. Additionally, peacekeeping was not key to their plan, it was not key to their solvency, but they chose to use it anyway, probably an indication of why their ideology and their ideological orientation is bad. So even under their framework, they should be losing because of the way they orient themselves to peacekeeping. Drop down to the third link. They use the framework of international law as a method. They view it as a way of giving themselves and this project legitimacy. Probably a reason why they link it to criticism. Going to our argumentation about why international law is bad, we say that the premise of what it means to be a state is something that controls the UN and the point in which they're not going to be actually giving into the colonized body, specifically those in Palestine, Mojave, or the people in taking law who are making demands upon the state but are not being listened to in public, are going to argue that these demands upon the state are not going to be listened to, especially if they're made in the context of international law, because it only cares about state actors' voices. You making demands upon the state is empirically going to fail because of the way that people in standing law have been denied by the state. It could historically in the past probably indication of why they're not going to be able to solve. Additionally, the international law arguments are related back into criticism because they use it as a legitimizing way. The way that they legitimize peacekeeping missions are both independent reasons about why their methodology is bad and why they cause all of the harms of the criticism. Drop to the impacts. This turns their case because of the way that this is key to the issue of resource securitization in developing countries. Additionally, flow across the impact of your epistemic eradication. This is going to be the most important round because of the way that it stops people from having subjective people before they even born and kill people before they even get a chance to be alive. This is the most important impact in the round because it is A, possible, B, it is probable, and C, it is repeatable. It happens over and over and over again, and it is always something that they're never going to check back on when it comes to inevitable in the world, the affirmative. On to the alternative. They say perm to the negative. They say that the affirmative already solves this. Cool. I don't actually have to answer this perm because it's not an actual perm. It's just perm to the negative. First of all, hey, this. No, it's literally perm to the negative. First of all, we're going to make an argumentation about this is separate from the affirmative. They do not talk about water's life in the text. Probably means that an indication that they're separating of the ontology of their text. Second argument is that it shows that the thing they're advocating is justified. They are okay leaving it by the wayside in order to try and win this round. Probably an indication of why they're not genuine advocates of this. Probably an indication of why they're never actually going to be able to resolve this because of their in-round discourse. Additionally, they've just made an argument that we don't solve without warranting this. First of all, extend across our entire first solvency argument about how we operate through a lens of double translation and negotiation perspectives. You see, each idea is important and equally important, and indigenous intellectuals are no longer seen as a curiosity or something to be studied by anthropologists, probably an indication of why we're simply ahead on the solvency debate. Cool. This means that under double translation and under the ethic of liberation, the people at Standing Rock who are saying fucking water is life will be listened to. They will be understood as important, and their voices and their ideology will matter. At the point where that's the way that the ethic of liberation is functioning and has been functioning this entire round, probably means we solve. We come out of the LOC saying on the fourth solvency point, the Water is Life organization, which is funded and organized by indigenous people, will be seen as more legitimate because of the alternative. Probably means we resolve the entirety of the affirmative. They need to spend way more time on alt solvency because there's just absolutely no way that they can come back from the things that they have dropped there. On to the framework. Regardless of whether you're going to prioritize decolonialism or water is life arguments, you're going to be voting for the negative because we're capable of resolving both of those questions, and the affirmative is completely behind this debate. However, we're going to argue that you should prioritize colonialism because the knowledge production of colonialism is a prior question to the creation of your ideology to begin with. He said that ideology motivates action, but the sorts of information that you're allowed to see and the sorts of information that you're allowed to treat as legitimate because of the legitimation of indigenous voices is going to control the way in which you view and people as legitimate. Probably indicates that we are a prior question to viewing water like legitimate as legitimate in the first place because of the way that the ethics of liberation and treat all different voices as legitimate. Additionally, we're going to argue that knowledge production is a prior question. Additionally, extend the argument that peacekeepers brought cholera to Haiti and exacerbated the water crisis substantially beyond what it was to begin with. Using peacekeepers in a material way, even if you're not evaluating all of our ideology arguments, probably indicates that they're going to fail on a material level. On to the overview stuff. They say that our links are bad because we only talk about the UN. First of all, they do not have to talk about the UN. Second of all, their discourse is important to their around solvency if they're going to try and argue about how their ideology is important. Third of all, their discourse reveals their epistemology and ideology, and because it reveals that, it reveals the ways in which they think that the UN and think that the international system of law is important and legitimate, and probably an indication of why their ideology itself is bad. Additionally, we're going to say that basically all of these arguments about why ideology is important. We're not going to argue that ideology isn't important. We're going to argue that knowledge production is a prior question, and additionally, their ideology is straight up bad because of the links to the criticism, specifically the conceded third link about the standards of international law, which is specifically important in the context of the actual literal water is life movements that was founded by indigenous people that don't belong to.
So, like 2 minutes into your speech, my Excel crashed and will not reopen, and I lost my flow. So I'm going to try to restart my computer really quick and see if it restores it so I can flow your speech on there.
All right.
Okay.
I'm really sorry.
No, that happens occasionally. I flow on a laptop, I know, so how that goes.
I won't reopen even, like the app won't even reopen, I don't know why. But I flowed your speech and that's worked on it.
Oh, okay, as long as there's something flowing.
Yeah, here, let me restart my computer really quick. I won't change it.
That was like a whole bunch of limitations regarding like, yeah, well, not just that, but also like there's ways that like the performative aspect of debate is like about getting judges to flow your arguments. So like having one judge flow your arguments and another not is like part of the thing. Yeah, I really want you to have the flow.
I have all the arguments, I just don't have them matched up.
Yeah, I mean that happens.
And hopefully, like, it didn't delete it because you have this crash.
Yeah. I like have lost a number of PMCs this year just often. So just walking around like I don't have a PMC, I don't have a PMC, I don't have a PMC. What do? Ask. Really bad when
It's just like the end of my computer. Because it doesn't really want to turn back on.
Oh no. How long have you had it?
So like maybe it's doing that. start in like the next 45 to 50 seconds. Shut down your computer because of problems. Do you want to open the last save version of this file? Yes, I do.
Excellent.
Autosave.
I love autosave.
Autosave, auto recovery is a wonderful thing when it works.
Yeah, no, that's...
Okay, well, I didn't get the MG synergy. I have the full PMC and the full LSC, but none of the MG, so I'm gonna have to consult with someone about that. Cool, sounds good. Yeah, and then as soon as you text me, you can hear the LOS.
Should I start?
I think just wait until she's ready.
Okay, makes sense. Just the argument.
I'm gonna start saving after every speech. I'm worried about us.
Yeah. There are a bunch of bad things going on with the office, but the one good thing is it syncs pretty regularly. Oh, I lose documents. I think in one word. It's such a pretty flow, it's like your flows were so pretty and mine were just completely illegible. Come on, girls, it seems so bad.
We can continue with interview anyway, and just figure it out again.
Alright, cool. Yeah.
We don't want to.
Order is gonna be links, impact, alt, framework, and that's sort of the both frameworks today. These are really, I think, one question of the framework anyway. And then there's two questions from mine. Probably we'll go study on our framework, so that's probably where we should start and go over their framework. And then I guess I might spend a few minutes just like explaining stuff about the case.
Repeat that word one more time.
Links, impacts, alternative, framework, ours first, then theirs, case.
Your links or the
Our links. All links to be voted on in this debate. All right, was this something? Oh, you're right. Cool, everybody ready? It's the third. So the research going to be voting for us today is the conceded third link about how the UN water rate to do the framework of international law. They're going to try to extend this kind of like reorientation argument. The fundamental argument here is that this preempts the reorientation argument. It doesn't matter how much you reorient yourself. The UN inherently does this thing through a framework of international law. There's no way the UN can exist outside of this framework of international law, right? Like it recognizes states as actors. That's 3A. Talking about
order.
Yep.
Analysis that reorientation of the UN is impossible is new analysis.
Not really. I mean, I would say that that's sort of an explanation of what the original point says. But
Yeah, it's not a consideration.
it's just closing doors anyway. Even if you don't buy, like, this is, like, obviously, if this works through a state's framework, this cannot be changed by any action that does not change the state's framework. This means that this link is ironclad. There's no way out of it through a nebulous and largely meaningless reorientation argument. Moreover, I'm going to just impact claim on that reorientation argument. Given that we get no explanation of what it means to reorient, or what the UN looks in this world after reorientation, you're probably going to look to the specifics about how colonialism has operated on all of these links. And the actual reality is that colonialism works through this kind of lens of saying, oh yeah, we're going to do a good thing. And that is a guise for colonialism and imperialism. That's the second link, and it largely addresses those arguments too. Yes.
It's an indication why the orientation would be bad because their ideology is bad.
It's also an indication of why their reorientation is bad, because it means their ideology is bad, right? Like, these are prior questions about whether or not they can reorient themselves out, because they're still linking into the critique, they're still doing these things, and those links still cause the impact. Because the actual reality is it is the action of the UN that turns the case. This creates the arbitrary divisions in the periphery, right? It is the legalism of the UN that gets used to turn ethnic groups and nationalities against each other, creating the civil wars that lead to the devastation that we're talking about, which is an internal link to their arguments about how water is used in civil wars. Additionally, the epidemic eradication prevents any form of reorientation, given that the master narrative destroys all counter-narratives to this epistemology, probably indicates that you have to take the action of the alternative, which has conceded solvency, instead of just using the peacekeeping fund, which is just an extension of failed status quo policies. On the alternative case, I want you to extend the conceded 3 and 4 solvency points. It means that we have 100% chance of solvency, means that any permutation is undesirable, especially with the conceded second, especially given that we legitimize indigenous voice, probably indicates that we just solve for the act, and probably indicates that we do a better job of handling questions about co-option than they do. Additionally, we say that the second link, solve argument goes unanswered, just answers the perm straight out. We need a rejection is key, probably important. Additionally, the offensiveness of the perm. Yeah, is the offensiveness of the perm about its big severance, but that's, yeah.
And that it makes them look
yeah. And the interpretation, the role of values to vote for the team has the best discursive method to resolving real world violence. We're going to say that's probably really important here. We say that in the real world, this kind of reorientation just doesn't happen from like any kind of just, oh yeah, we do this thing. We say that knowledge production is the internal link to ideology, probably indicates that we have just control of the prior questions of knowledge production in this debate. They're probably going to get up trying to argue that, but like, you can't have knowledge production without this, so I don't see how they possibly could. Additionally, we say that post-colonialism comes. Additionally, we say that water insecurity in developing nations is caused by colonialism. We extend the very idea of like water is life being about an anti-colonial movement. Probably indicates that like any water is life arguments are going to rely on not being colonial, and given the UN as a colonial actor, there's just no way out for them to use the UN and then claim they're engaging in water and life. It can only be co-option.
It can't solve it.
It can only solve, to make these worse, given the UN peacekeepers on the case. Look, they're going to try to weigh the case here, but we turn the case, we solve the case. The whole point of this argument is what they do doesn't make the situation better, it makes it worse.
One minute?
1 minute.
No, I quit. I was like, well, fucking receive orders. I think it's like some weird malfunction because like my office suite is paid for through my school, and I think I was like connect the internet to verify that I'm a student, and the internet here is not. I've done that recently enough or something. I don't really know though.
And you have to connect to different internet in this building, so.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, it's the gas network, not the other one.
Yeah, because the other network just like doesn't work in this building.
The other network doesn't work in your building, it's supposed to work too.
Yeah.
I'm on my hotspot all the time, so.
They did warn us.
Right, the order is going to be an overview, my own overview. I will be referencing Caitlin's overview, then our framework, our Water is Life page, our advocacy, briefly, then the alternative, links, and the impacts of the criticism, with the advantage on the bottom. Yeah, absolutely. So, overview, Caitlin's overview, the affirmative framework and Water is Life, and advocacy. Then the alternative links and impacts of the critique, and then the advantage on the bottom. ready? Okay, they're both valid to vote for the best discursive method to solve real-world violence. I'm going to tell you why we're running for 3 reasons. First, we say Caitlin and I are not the UN. We are making demands of the UN, imagining a UN that is completely reoriented with its conceptions to water. We never claim to be acting as the UN, but rather making demands of the UN and imagining a UN that is reoriented. The second point is that we say this reorientation is the best method to solve real-world violence for every actor, including the UN and us in this room. We say that seeing water as a justice question, not a charity question, is essential to stopping colonialism. We say it is not until we stop seeing water as a weapon or gift, but life and death, that we will stop using it to be colonial. Deconstructing discourse of water is a prerequisite to stopping colonialization in this instance. Regardless of whether or not the UN is good or bad, it is probably good for the UN, us, and everyone to orient themselves towards water in this way. They concede that they say otherization is violence without describing what violence is, and the affirmative is literally recontextualizing the definition of violence in a way that is necessary for the alt to function in the first place. This is part, like my partner's analysis that says that we are like redefining what violence is, that you cannot say that like we are causing violence without understanding first what violence is. This is not something we talk about in debate, that we say like get off the rock, and that's not something that I can explain to my grandmother. It's probably better to talk about why our impacts actually matter and have an orientation and ideology that is a prerequisite to understanding our post-beyond impacts. Then the third reason that we're running under the rule of law is that they can see the link argument that we don't put peacekeepers on the ground and take money out of existing peacekeeping funds for militarization use. This goes like cold conceded and unresponded to, which means that we probably solve back for a lot of the concerns that they're talking about, and that we fit into their method of solving for real-world violence anyway, on our framework in particular. So I want you to extend our ideological constraints. Specifically say that what counts as a meaningful link needs to be constrained by the prior question of ideology and how we see ourselves in relationship to water. That all impacts they need to be evaluated through a reorientation towards water, and that specifically. I also want you to extend out my partner's overview that this is all about how we see that all of their impacts are to how we see the UN in this quo, not the UN that orients itself in a certain way towards water. We are imagining a UN that does not act in colonial ways, specifically with water, because that was the topic. That was why we picked the UN. That was why we picked water. We're imagining a UN that doesn't see water in this way. Yeah, we didn't have to use the UN, but we thought like, how could we imagine like an organization that is currently using colonial ways to like use water as a weapon and imagine that it's not doing that. We say that this is always going to be a prerequisite because ideology comes before policy. Because that is the most proximal impact, that it is our ideologies that we leave this room with it. We are never actually going to like vote in the UN, which probably means that like that is the most proximal impact and the actual way that we will be able to solve real-world violence if we stop seeing water as charity and see it more as justice. And that's why we transferred it from UNICEF to peacekeeping. They don't put any ink on the advocacy. This is the specific reason why we use the peacekeeping fund to emphasize that water is life. Water is not a gift. It's not a humanitarian problem. It is a life problem. Then on the water's life, again, defer by, okay, so when we said defer by, we said defer to the ways that systemically marginalized describe water. They say that we are co-opting narratives. We specifically credit Standing Rock with saying water is life. We say that we should defer to the way that marginalized people describe the value of water. This is analysis straight out of the LOC when I talk about how we should look to the way that Standing Rock, Flint, and the Global South characterize water as life. And like this, and like my historic analysis also goes on to this. On our advocacy proper, again, you can just extend that. That we're doing this through the peacekeeping fund, and that our solvency here is that because we are reorienting the way that water is seen not as a weapon or a gift, but as life. Then on the alternative, okay, so on these perm arguments, so the new argument that water is life is anti-colonial is evidence that this is Plan Plus. We specifically say that the perm...
The water is life is anti-colonial comes out of the 1A, the 1NC, about 2 or 4.
4A.
Okay.
What? Our solvency for
I mean, I have that float as answers to the perm, which we couldn't have.
yeah, I'm sure it's under
It's yours
consideration.
under consideration, so it's just an extension, but yeah.
All right. Regardless, I want to extend my partner's articulation that the perm is the non-competitive parts of the alternative because we literally are a prerequisite to the alternative happening anyway. That this is just Plan Plus. That literally the affirmative is like what needs to happen before we can do the alternative, and that the alternative only functions in a world where we're doing the affirmative anyway. That we cannot reject colonialism until we see this as a justice issue, not a charity issue. Okay, I'm going to explain this a little bit. When we see things as charity, we see things as us being able to go in and help people and re-entrench these kinds of savior complex issues. When we see this as a justice problem, we see this as life and death and not a gift, that this is always going to change the way that we orient ourselves and force us to not use water as a weapon or a gift because we value it intrinsically the way that we value life. We say that we need to value life intrinsically and that water should be valued intrinsically similarly, and that is why it should be seen as a justice issue, and that is why we solve, and that is why the alt is not able to solve without the F.
On the severance argument, extend that this is the method of the PMC.
Yeah, on the severance argument, extend that this is the method of the PMC, that we are not suffering from our advocacy, we're not leaving our plan by the wayside. Literally, we are the method of anti-colonialism by redefining violence in a way that recognizes that we need to value life intrinsically, and that water is part of that. Then on the links, again, you can extend the link term that we take money away from peacekeepers. Their only links are that we use the UN and peacekeepers. We literally say we're not using anyone. We are imagining making demands on these groups. Then on the impacts, they don't get access to the impacts when they literally have no link, which means that you have to extend the impacts of the affirmative, which I know we are humanizing people and seeing and reducing violence because we are stopping this kind of reorientation.